Tyson Fury. His view, he says, for the best place for women is being on their backs or in the kitchen.
I'm glad he's not my client.
When it's spilled over, go on, what's a bad moment?
I mean, the famous one was Derek Chisora and Dillian White, where he picked up the table, the press conference table, and threw it at... It was aimed at Dillian White, but actually went on myself.
Andy Murray turned down £1.5 million to play in Saudi because of human rights concerns. It does happen, I suppose. There are individuals who take that.
Yeah, but it was a lot more money than that, and maybe if they offered Andy Murray more, he would have gone.
That was the boxing promoter, Eddie Hearn. In this conversation, you're going to hear about why he didn't go to court for Anthony Joshua and why men still want to punch each other in the face. It's both the same and very different. Either way, promoters are more powerful than ever, and the stakes are just as high. Hello and welcome. My guest this week is promoter, entrepreneur, and arguably one of the most powerful people in boxing, Eddie Hearn. His company, Matchroom Sport, has been credited with taking boxing to another level, and his partnership with Anthony Joshua has got him into a few scrapes of his own. Luckily, just verbal. Welcome, Eddie.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. I wanted to start by asking, why do two people, do you think, want to still punch each other in the face in 2022?
It is bizarre, isn't it? And there's kind of no excuse for boxing. It's very difficult to explain to people. And, you know, the argument will always come up if there is an injury in the sport specifically, which has become a lot safer. How does this exist in this modern day world that we live in? It's historic. There's so many fundamentals to boxing, which we'll probably come to, about actually what the sport can teach the younger generation. But none of it really makes sense. And it's the most compelling sport for me in the world, the most addictive sport, because when you explain it to people, it is two men, and now women as well, going into a 20 by 20 foot ring to have a fight with each other in front of the world.
But what's going on between those two people in your experience? Because sometimes you will have known both of them when you're promoting. Do they actually want to hurt the individual, or is it about what they're doing?
I think that, you know, it's about winning. It's a sport at the end of the day. I don't think... Sometimes people don't get on with the opponent. You know, there's a lot of things... Yeah, there's a lot of things said backwards and forwards. But generally, it's about winning the fight tactically, going in there and you know, executing a performance that you've been working on for weeks, months, sometimes years. A fighter's career reaches that moment. But again, these people, they're not always normal people. They can't be normal, actually, to do what they do and to fight at that level. So you have to be a little bit careful from my position. You've got to sell the fight, hype the fight. Sometimes it spills over. I've been in the middle of that quite a few times. But generally, that sort of back and forth, that animosity, that tension and energy between two fighters is ultimately what sells. You know, it's what's going to create narrative and interest to the public and to fight fans.
When it's spilled over, go on, what's a bad moment?
I mean, the famous one was Derek Chisora and Dillian White, where he picked up the table, the press conference table, and threw it at... Well, it was aimed at Dillian White, but actually went on myself and Adam Smith from Sky, and some great photos of that and stuff like that. But
were you scared?
Not really. I've been around boxing since I was 7 years old.
A table being thrown at you, had that
I
happened
just
before?
sort of, you know, blocked it. But that was a new one. But, you know, I've been around because of you know, my dad being a promoter as well. I've been around boxing since I was 8 years old. I've been in the middle of fights at press conferences. I've been in the middle of fighters getting injured or crying backstage or cheering backstage, or, you know, every kind of emotion that you see in the sport. And it's incredibly addictive because it's such a compelling sport. And like I said earlier, it's not normal.
Are you any good at fighting?
I had a couple of amateur fights. Terrible.
Are you tough now?
No, I'm not tough. I mean, I'm a silver spoon kid, aren't I, as my dad always calls me. But, you know, I grew up, you know, my weekends were hanging around with Nazim Hamid or Chris Eubank or Frank Bruno. So I thought I could fight. But you don't become really a fighter when you come from my kind of background.
You don't think that?
No. Very rarely will you find someone who's come from a privileged background, really, which I would say I have. You know, my dad's from Dagenham, you know, East London, but he was successful and I was very lucky. But it's a different kind of life you have to live as a fighter. And to come through the ranks like these young men and women do, you have to be made of tougher stuff. And very rarely will you see someone come from that kind of background to go on and make it in the sport. And again, that's what's compelling as well, to be part of that journey. My dad always said to me, if you can get 1% of the adrenaline that these fighters get when they walk out to fight, you're a very lucky man. And I feel like sometimes I get 80% because, you know, the buzz is what we live for.
Also, the money must be pretty good. $1 billion TV deal to stream all of your fights. How do you explain your job, apart from, you know, being in the action? What do you actually do?
Well, I guess I put it together. I kind of like, when I started promoting boxing, which was probably about 12 or 13 years ago, I never went in with the intention to kind of build my profile to a level where I'm part of the show as well. And I should have, because that was the right thing to do, but it just emerged over the years as we went. But I'm like the guy who puts the circus together. You know, it's my job to go out, to build the fights, to create the narrative, to sell the story, to get the public and fight fans invested in the event and fights. And that's what we do at Matchroom. And we've gone, of course, from, you know, being a big UK promoter to being a global powerhouse in boxing. That streaming deal is with DAZN, our TV partners, and global streaming giant. And that's taken us into the US with a big deal, taking us into key markets like Italy, Spain, Australia, Mexico, and we keep on expanding around the world. And that's the plan for us, is to dominate boxing globally, with a different feel, with a different kind of professional touch to the live event experience, both in the arena and for viewers watching on the platform.
So putting on that show, getting it to people, putting the business side of it together. But as you mentioned there about taking a meeting, you know, how does, for instance, Anthony Joshua, how does that relationship start? Do you give him a card? How do you meet?
Yeah. Well, with Anthony Joshua, it's actually quite a funny story. I'll tell you quickly. I received a letter once from a gymnasium to say, look, you know, there's this really promising young heavyweight, but he's got himself in some trouble and he has to appear in court. And we would like you to come and talk about, if this young man was as good as we think he is, what could he achieve, or what could the future hold for him? And I looked at the letter and thought, I don't even know the kid. I'm not going to court.
I'm not going to court.
That one
right
went
now.
straight in the bin. And then I went up to the GB Institute and I just heard this noise, and it was a heavy bag. I know the noise well, just being moved around, you know, on its pivot. And I turned around to Robert McCracken, the coach, and said, who's that? And he said, that's Anthony Joshua. This kid's special. And I thought, oh no, that was the name on the letter. I wish I would have responded. He went into the Olympics, and you almost hope they don't win the Olympics, because then everybody's going to be after his signature. Of course, he won gold in London 2012. And in terms of British boxing, and probably world boxing as well, we're probably the first stop that you would go to for a meeting. Say, you know, when you want to meet other promoters, you'd come to Matchroom. So we had that meeting. Sometimes I've got the benefit of being younger than the other promoters and probably get on better with the younger fighters. But, you know, with Anthony, he was a dream signing, because he won gold at the London 2012 Olympics. He was a heavyweight. He was articulate.
Did he forgive you for not going to court?
I told him a story. Yeah, he was probably. Still couldn't believe they asked me to do it. But he's very intelligent, Anthony, and asked a lot of questions. And I could see him sort of look at me as if to say, I'm not sure I trust you guys, you know. And I said to him at the meeting, I said, look, go and see everybody and then take your time, make your decision. Whereas everybody else said, sign now. And he went away for about 3 or 4 months. I never heard from him. I thought, oh, I shouldn't have said that. And then he came back and he said, we want to sign with you guys, which was, you know, a really big moment for our business.
It is still a largely male sport. I know things are starting to change, but do you think in some ways boxing represents, in some ways, an outdated version of masculinity, or is it an important part of being a man?
I think it's changing a lot. You know, I think the world is changing, and sport is changing in that respect as well. You know, the openness across that area, whether you're talking about mental health, you know, that you see a lot of fighters that struggle in that area, as you do with a lot of sportsmen. And I feel that people are willing to talk more about many different talking points. Boxing has always got the sort of, you know, the perception of being a tough guy's sport. The influx of women's boxing has been huge for us, and we've been the real trailblazers with the fighters to to take that part of the sport forward. So I think it's changed a lot over the years. I think, you know, back in the day, if you want to say that word, it was definitely a sort of, you know, brawn and sort of
it's still like
it
that,
is,
though,
but I
isn't
think
it?
it's changing. You know, you're seeing fashion brands coming into the sport. You're seeing a younger generation with social media and content. You're starting to understand the characters more. People are opening up more. People are willing to talk more. People talk about their trials, tribulations, you know, their struggles.
The trash talk too.
Trash talk's great for us because, you know, that's what people want to see. You know, sometimes I'll do a
they don't want to see somebody talking about their mental health, do they?
No,
they want to see them being pugilistic.
Exactly,
they want to see all of that.
But
I wonder, does that perpetuate a stereotype of men that you're saying we're moving away from in other parts? And there might not be anything wrong with that. I don't know if it is a stereotype. It's how a lot of men still are and feel.
Yeah, but it's important for us to tell stories. I mean, we're also, you know, we are event promoters, but we're also content creators. You know, we run our own production company. I like to produce content. I like to tell the story of a fighter and their struggle and their life, because that's how you create personalities and game fans. And, you know, we need fight fans to see that side, not just someone walking in and going head to head with another guy and flexing his muscles. Tell the story. Every individual in boxing has a tremendous story. Tremendous story. You know, I've got Lawrence Okoli, the world cruiserweight champion. He was working at McDonald's in Waterloo. And one day he was flipping burgers. He was grossly overweight and he saw Anthony Joshua win gold at London 2012. And he walked out of McDonald's. He says, I'm going to take up boxing and change my life. He's world cruiserweight champion. You know, there are so many inspirational stories in boxing.
But there are some of the most famous, Tyson Fury, and you look at what he likes to say publicly. Would you say that is defined by role model, manners? His view, he says, for the best place for women is being on their backs or in the kitchen.
It's definitely not something we support. And he's quite a unique individual with that respect.
But he's a big name.
Yeah, he is a big name, and not everybody is everybody's role model.
Of course not, you know, but I suppose when you've got those in the mix...
Yeah, but sure, but for Tyson Fury, away from those comments, you know, this is also a guy that came back from pretty much obesity and mental illness himself. To a lot of people, he is a role model. Now,
should he be?
That's based on the individual's perception, I think. It's not down to me to say whether, you know, I look after myself and my family. Are they things that I would want my children to look up to? Of course not. I wouldn't even want them to see it. But the fighters that I know, Katie Taylor being the best example in terms of my daughters, right? There is no one that I would like my kids to meet more and be around than Katie Taylor.
So is it very frustrating when there are those characters in your world? No, I mean, he said he would celebrate post-match in 2020. I'm not holding you to account for
I'm glad he's not my client.
But he did say to celebrate with cocaine and hookers. You know, these are the direct words. I think it's important to share with our viewers what I'm actually talking about in the mix.
I also think that regardless of the fact that, yes, you're right, he is a big name, it is in isolation. You're always going to get them. You're always going to get the controversial characters. Sometimes I think actually he says things he doesn't actually mean, but, you know, that's another story.
He says nice things about you sometimes as well.
Sometimes, not often.
No.
But again...
He called you a bad businessman. I mean,
well, yeah.
Your last deal doesn't look so bad.
Exactly. The record speaks for itself.
There we go, it's coming. Yeah. Do you get frustrated, though, by that? Does that bother you?
It's all part of the game. And that's why when I look at those comments, although they shouldn't be said, because he does have a position as a role model in society, they go over my head because I know the man, you know. And
but they don't go over some people's
No, I agree. But then again, this is the real life, and we can't expect perfection from everybody, especially from people that might not have been brought up in that way. And I don't mean that disrespectfully for him, but you know, these aren't normal individuals. Sometimes they say stupid things. Sometimes they do stupid things. We all do, and sometimes people more so than others. So, you know, in that respect, you can never condone those comments. But, you know, again, I go back to boxing, the community, what it does for people. And I know, you know, again, going back to my kids, there is no place I'd rather them be than in a boxing gym. Actually, and for someone who's got two daughters, I never thought I'd say that until I started to get involved with women's boxing and what Katie Taylor taught me, how she's inspired me. You know, I don't go down the gym and start boxing because of Katie Taylor, but the values and the fundamentals that she has in terms of discipline and drive and winning.
Would you like your daughters to be boxers? if they wanted to be? You would support that?
I would. Now, when I talk about them going into a gym, I don't talk about them going into a gym with a view to become a professional fighter.
But it is interesting to hear sometimes when people work in an industry, if they actually would put their most precious person in there.
I want my children to chase their dreams in terms of the passion that's lit within them, right? And if that's through boxing, then I would 100% support that. Now, if I had a choice, would I want them to be fighters? Absolutely not. If I had a choice, would I want them to be part of our company, my company, our family business?
Like you were with
Not really.
No? Not like you took on from your father?
Because people think that it's, a nice, what's been given the reins, if you like, but it's a different kind of struggle. It's not the struggle to necessarily put food on the table, but it's a struggle to make your own name in your own right. Because when you're born to a successful father, and you see this in sport, I mean, Chris Eubank, with his dad, Conor Benn, one of our fighters with his dad, Nigel Benn, you're always Nigel Benn's son or Chris Eubank's son. So the struggle is more to create your own identity, and to do that, you have to go above and beyond what they did.
Do you feel you've done it?
Yeah, I do. But
what was the moment you felt you did it?
I think with what we've done for boxing, my dad was a huge promoter in the UK, still is, of course, snooker, but never went internationally and did major TV deals, never staged mega fights in America like I have, and all those kind of stuff. And that was like a subconscious chip on the shoulder to say, that's the only way I can get respected, because otherwise I've just been given it. And I was given it. I was given an opportunity that others wouldn't have. So I had to go above and beyond that. But I don't want my daughters to have the same kind of pressures, if you like, to sort of try and outperform me. But I want them to be passionate about something. And that's why I come back to sport, because we live in an age where kids are on their phones and they're not out, they're not exercising, they're reading negativity on social media, and it's just a complete, influx of information in that respect. Sport is the answer.
On your deals and forging into new markets, getting that chip off your shoulder and doing different deals, bringing boxing to different places, you are forging into new markets like the Middle East, specifically Saudi Arabia. And you said in 2019 you wanted Saudi to be the home of mega boxing, take over from Vegas. How's that going? Obviously there's been a global pandemic.
Yeah, well, it was, we did Anthony Joshua against Andy Ruiz, the rematch there, which went very well. It was a huge event. Obviously 2020 was significantly slowed down, 2021, from the pandemic. There are talks with not just Saudi Arabia, but of course Abu Dhabi, Dubai, and that region about bringing major fights there. And they're going to be very aggressive in that marketplace because, there is a desire from those countries to bring major sporting events there.
You talked there about trying to do what's right. And I wonder, do you have any moral qualms about a country where, I don't know, women weren't allowed to drive until recently, human rights concerns, especially with Saudi Arabia?
Well, I think if they want to change and if they're going to change, they need to make statements and they need to bring a focus on their territory. I mean, you talk about, sport washing, which is a question that really you're referring to.
Yeah.
And the answer is if you want to modernise, a world or a country like Saudi Arabia, they want to do it in many different ways, but bringing big events to that territory is very important to them. When I say about, Formula One going to Saudi Arabia, the PGA Golf Tour, WWE, major tennis tournaments, it's not that I pass the buck and say, look, we're only boxing. Why shouldn't we? But boxing is prize fighting, okay? So it's very different. I don't really have a right to say to Anthony Joshua and Andy Ruiz, we've had this offer. You guys are going in to fight each other, and this is the opportunity for you.
Andy Murray, of course, one of the UK's greatest tennis exports, turned down £1.5 million to play in Saudi because of human rights concerns. It does happen, I suppose. There are individuals who take that.
Yeah, but it was a lot more money than that, and maybe if they offered Andy Murray more, he would have gone.
But the opportunity only seems to be right for your fighters if the money is right.
No, but that was my comment on Andy Murray. I mean, you're not talking about...
No, but you're saying to me they're prize fighters.
They're prize fighters.
So I'm trying to get into the mentality of it.
I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
If a fighter was offered $5 million to take a fight and there was an opportunity to fight for $30 million in a sport which is incredibly dangerous and you never know when it's your last opportunity to be involved in a fight, it's a different kind of conversation rather than $1 million to play a tennis match.
If you Google you, do you do that? Do you Google
No,
yourself?
not.
Come on, you must a little bit.
Not for a long time, but I think I probably have done. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. You did it last night. Eddie Hearn and the memes.
Oh,
These
yeah.
memes of you. No Context Hearn
Yeah.
is a Twitter account
Yes.
that has several 100,000 Twitter
Yeah.
followers. What's your favourite one? These are things you seem to just do. I mean, it's not you, is it?
Yeah.
Do you run that? No. Do you run that account?
No. What happened?
Somebody thought
by
you
the way,
did.
Yeah, and it would have been genius, you know. And actually, if I'd have thought of it, I probably would have started it myself. But it's a guy called Andy.
Oh, you know the
because
person?
he sent me the message on Twitter. He works for the NHS, and he said to me, "Look, I've watched your interviews. Would you mind if I do this No Context Hearn? No Context is something that exists, you know, with some other sites as well." And I was like, yeah, crack on, mate. I mean, how big can that get? And it just went 2,000 followers, 10,000, 20,000, 100,000, 200,000, 300.
So he just takes clips
of my interviews, and then people use those clips in context to something else. So it'll say, like, you know, when Liverpool score or win away at the weekend, and
it's you going
dancing.
mad.
Yeah. So
how do you feel about that though? Because some people wouldn't like it.
It's actually worked really well for me.
They wouldn't like themselves
but
being out
I never
of
take
context.
myself too seriously anyway. I think that's very important in life. But it's worked well for me because it's opened up a different audience. You know, I was known by fight fans, but now you're talking about, you know, kids, sort of young adults, you know, more women, because it's everywhere. But the problem is you get referred to as the meme guy. And I took my kids to a trampoline park the other day, and there was a girl letting us in. So, I mean, she must have been, I don't know, 16, 15. And she went, "Is it you?" And I'm thinking, wow, you know, Katie Taylor's obviously working here. A lot of younger. She goes, "You're the meme guy." And I was like, and my kids, you know, when I pick them up from school, all the kids are going, they're not saying that because I'm doing a show on Saturday. They're doing that because of No Context Hearn.
You're the funny man on the internet.
Yeah, but, you know.
Have you got a favourite one?
Whatever it takes.
Is there one of you just doing something you don't even almost remember?
Yeah, there's so many. I mean, there was me. I was selling strawberries on a market stall in Hull because one of my boxers, their family has a fruit stall in Hull. A young lady walked past and I said, "You in the headband, you are different gravy." And it's just, they play it all the time. And if there's a footballer with a headband on, I mean, it's just...
It gets you.
Yeah, and but there's so many.
I've got to ask you, because I've thought about this and I don't know quite my decision. What would be your music if you were a fighter and you were walking in? What would be the tune that you would pick? You must have imagined yourself doing what some of your fighters
do. You know, there's a song by Whitesnake called Here I Go Again, or Here We Go Again. And it was actually a song that Mickey Ward, a great Irish fighter, an American fighter, used to walk out to. And it's like, you know, so it's "Here we go again, walking down the only road I know." It's quite deep.
And what would be your style, do you think? You'd walk out, Eddie Hearn's there, the man off the internet.
I don't know. I mean, just embarrassing, probably. Like, I think I can dance. I think I can sing.
Yeah.
I think I'm very limited at both. But, you know,
well,
I think that I would look the part.
You'd have to.
Yes, but I think once the bell went, there'd be a major problem. Yeah, and it would be for me, not for the other person.
Eddie Hearn, thank you so much for talking to me and to our viewers.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for being with us. Until we meet again, stay safe and goodbye.